We're getting close. SpaceX reveals new information about Booster 12's catch, and you won't believe how close they were to disaster. Booster 13 rolls back after its static fire campaign. What's left before Flight 6? Is SpaceX about to fly its first Starship with Payload? And New Glenn gets its engines. What's left before it can fly? My name is Felix, welcome to What About It. Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Things are getting crazy here at Starbase as SpaceX works around the clock to prepare for Flight 6, which could take place in under 2 weeks. We finished off last week with a truly incredible 33-engine static fire of Booster 13, and with that now complete, engineers need to check over the booster to ensure the static fire was as successful as it appeared. To do that, and to finish all the other upgrades needed for the booster, it needed to be back at the production site. That's why on the morning of the 15th we saw the chopstick catch arms close in around it before lifting it into the air. However, before it was placed back down on the ground, SpaceX had one last test it wanted to perform. Instead of being placed back on the ground, the booster was lifted to the maximum height of the tower where it would be after a catch and held there temporarily. This test was actually more for the chopsticks rather than the booster, as it tests to ensure they are actually capable of lifting the full weight of the booster at landing and holding it, as well as ensuring that they are still able to reach the maximum height. After a few minutes suspended hundreds of feet in the air over South Texas, Booster 13 was then placed back down onto its transport stand for what will hopefully be its last trip to the production site before its first launch. Hopefully it's the first of many launches. However, SpaceX may still have some rough edges to work out, but we'll talk more about that later. After being placed back on its transport stand, Highway 4 was closed off so that this gigantic vehicle could be rolled down the road and to the production site. From here it will receive its final checks and preparations before its flight, including its hot staging ring. This process is usually fairly quick, meaning this booster may be ready to fly before the end of the month. All that's missing now is its Ship 31. It is currently undergoing heat shield upgrades and is possibly the main thing keeping the launch date at November 11th instead of even earlier. There hasn't been much news regarding the heat shield, but we may have spotted something else destined for Ship 31. SpaceX moved the Starlink loader a few days ago, which feeds Starlink satellites into the unique and highly specialized payload bay used on current Starships. Wait, what? This is needed because unlike many other payload bays, which have large fairings that detach and expose the whole payload to space, a current Starship only has a small slot in which to dispense payloads, and it works in a similar way to a Pez dispenser. It's a Pez dispenser! This gadget was temporarily moved to the Sanchez storage site and appeared to be loaded with version 2 Starlink satellites, meaning they will likely be installed on a ship. Let's do it! SpaceX may intend to install these on Ship 31 to be deployed during Flight 6. Now that SpaceX has reached a partial orbit successfully 3 times in a row, they likely have more than enough confidence to put the Starship into a full orbit to deploy these satellites. The only foreseeable problem with this would be regulators. Given that SpaceX intends to use the same license they used for Flight 5 on Flight 6, it is likely that putting Starship into a full orbit rather than a similar partial one, like on Flight 5, would count as a drastic enough change to warrant a new license. That means these are more likely to be for Flight 7 or 8. Still. With them being moved over to the Sanchez site, some of you may be wondering, well, couldn't they be for Ship 32, which is also at the Sanchez site? While this would make sense, it's unlikely that Ship 32 will ever fly, and after some brand new developments with its likely replacement candidate Ship 33, it has gone from unlikely to all but confirmed. Ship 33 is the first Block 2 Starship, sporting massive upgrades that SpaceX has learned over the past year and a half or so of developing and flying Starships. It has so many upgrades that it'll be more like the beginning of a new era than just another prototype. This ship began stacking in July and finished in late August. Since then, workers have been slowly finishing the internals and finalizing all the fine details. Now, just 4 months later, it is done. Yes! On the morning of the 25th, as teams were preparing to destack Booster 13 at the launch site, workers at the production site were preparing to stack Ship 33 onto its thrust simulator, which had just been rolled into the Megabay. The Megabay door opened, giving us our first look at this ship since the short glimpse we got during the Flight 5 livestream. Ooh, looky looky. Except this time it appeared much more complete, with almost the entire heat shield installed. The ship was then placed on the thrust simulator stand, which replicates the forces of the 6 Raptor engines on the ship to ensure all systems are ready. We then watched as this marvel of engineering was rolled down Highway 4 to Massey's testing range for its first proper testing. From here, the ship should undergo a cryogenic proofing campaign, which is expected any day now. Ship 33 may have stolen quite a bit of spotlight for Block 2 ships. However, Ship 34, the second of these upgraded ships, hasn't been standing still either. Ship 34 is growing yet again, with the second section of its liquid oxygen tank being rolled into Megabay 2 for installation. This means that only 2 sections are still missing before Ship 34 completes stacking. At this rate, we should see this ship finishing stacking around the end of this month or early next month. With SpaceX's recent testing successes and Musk's statement that they will attempt a ship catch early next year, it is possible that Ship 34 may actually be the first ship to attempt a catch. However, before SpaceX attempts a catch with a ship, they must ensure they can properly catch a booster. Here's the thing. While they successfully caught Booster 12 during Flight 5, it's not guaranteed that they will be able to do the same for future flights. What? Given recent developments regarding that catch, SpaceX clearly still has some work to do to ensure the booster catch is reliable and repeatable at a massive scale. But before I tell you about that, we've looked into our channel metrics and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. We just hit 500,000 subscribers, 500,000 of you. Help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we've posted so far. Satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week. Insights, chats with me, you name it. Thank you so much, you rock. Back to booster catching and the secret story behind Flight 5. The catch of Booster 12 was nothing short of extraordinary. Its success showed the world that Starship isn't just some fancy renders and prototypes, but rather a vehicle capable of revolutionizing space travel as we know it. However, we have now learned about a few problems that occurred during the catch. Problems. In a post by Musk in which he was showing off some of his gaming skills, we were also treated to a quick glimpse into some of the problems that Booster 12 faced during its landing. This isn't a joke. While he was playing Diablo 4, his engineers were simultaneously briefing Musk at SpaceX. Damn, I want a game like that. During this briefing, some new information about the landing came to light. The engineers explained that there was a misconfigured spin gas support that did not have the correct ramp-up time. What? The engineers stated that this misconfiguration was only 1 second away from causing an abort, which would have led to the booster aborting and crashing into the ground rather than attempting to land. What? So a misconfigured what? Spin gas? Let's break this down to determine what exactly that means. For starters, an important thing to note is that the engineer was going in chronological order, meaning that this was the first incident to occur. Given that just after this they talk about the chine being ripped off, we know that this was likely right before or during the engine start. In this case, the spin gas support system they refer to is part of the Raptor engine startup process. Starting a rocket engine can be extremely complicated, as the turbines that run an engine require the engine to be running in order for it to work. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg situation. No engine running means no turbopump running, but no turbopump running means no engine running. Because of that, starting a liquid-fueled engine typically requires a separate high-pressure starting gas, such as helium, to begin spinning the turbine before the engine kicks on and can power itself. That means this misconfigured turbine was not spinning fast enough to restart the engine for a landing burn. And had this misconfiguration been just a second slower, the booster would have registered a faulty engine start and, out of an abundance of caution, aborted the landing to crash into the ground just next to the tower. What? Interestingly, this also confirms that the path the booster took, where it seemed to target just next to the launch tower before moving into its arms, was intended as a final safety scenario so the booster could crash into the ground instead of the tower. They later went on to explain that this misconfiguration, despite the possibility of leading to an abort, would not have endangered the rocket in any meaningful way. Okay. They also confirmed that they had added a large number of abort scenarios and requirements that, if not met, would have made the booster automatically abort, and that they were being extra cautious to avoid any mishaps. Yes, please, no mishaps. After that, they also began to talk about the chine cover, which was ripped off during landing and was the only visible malfunction. According to the engineers, this cover was actually right over many single-point failure valves, meaning that if these failed, the whole mission would have failed as well. I hate the word single-point failure. Fortunately, none of the underlying hardware was damaged or dislodged, so Booster 12 could complete its landing successfully. The engineers stated that this was caused by poor margins on the welds connecting the chine skin to the underlying structure, mixed with stresses at the engine start. Unfortunately, that was all the information we were able to gather on that, and it's still a bit of a mystery how the engine start actually caused this to happen. Whether it was gases that became trapped under the vibrations of the engines is a mystery, as the clip ended right as they began talking about the cause. I demand longer gaming sessions for Musk. We also gathered one more thing from this short conversation. This current launch schedule is 100% driven by SpaceX. This is actually the first time this has happened during the Starship program, with all other final launch dates being a result of how quickly the FAA could approve the flight. They brought this up because the booster is the main driver behind the Flight 6 schedule, as teams comb through the data gathered on Flight 5 to determine things such as when an abort is truly needed and when the booster is actually still good to attempt a landing. All this is incredibly important news, and it shows how much each and every launch progresses forward. Unbiased and factually correct news is hard to come by in today's media landscape. Everyone seems to be focused on you clicking the headline rather than informing you thoroughly about everything that happened. During my recent Starship Flight 5 research, I wanted to find out if there really is anything to the ongoing debate about SpaceX being politicized due to Elon Musk's recent involvements in politics. Is SpaceX being reported about in a bad light, or is it just a feeling? Is there truth to the bias? There is a tool for you to find out, Ground News. I use it regularly for research. What I love about having their web extension is not having to do any extra work to cross-reference my information and see what others say about the news I am researching. Clicking on full coverage instantly gives the full breakdown with a quick summary on top and all the articles Ground News collected below. Convenient. I can instantly see how many sources are reporting on SpaceX's Starship Flight 5. The left is talking more and positively about it. They seem to be agreeing with what we're saying and why. Ground News is the world's first news comparison platform ever. It makes it extremely easy to dive into topics I care about. Try it out today. Go to ground.news/y for 40% off the Vantage subscription, which is what I use, or start for just $1 per month. That's ground.news/y for 40% off the Vantage subscription, and by signing up you also directly support Y. To many, it seems strange that starships have so many apparent problems. Flight 1 was a disaster, Flight 2 wasn't much better, and so on. This is because SpaceX is building a completely new vehicle. This isn't an 80% copy of something already existing, such as ULA's Falcon rocket. While most parts are different on Falcon, they still resemble a traditional rocket with no special demands: launch, deploy payload, and fall into the ocean. Starship, though, is a very different story. With the engine problem Booster 12 encountered, SpaceX likely wants to perform even more testing on its Raptor engines to ensure everything is well ironed out. They do that a bit further north at McGregor, Texas. Here, SpaceX has a large Raptor engine testing facility where they can test multiple engines by static firing them. Recently, we saw SpaceX break their record for the longest static fire of a Raptor engine with a mind-boggling 15-minute static fire, but SpaceX wasn't done breaking records just yet. They're putting Raptor through its paces. Something really special happened on the 23rd. SpaceX fired up a Raptor on their tripod stand at McGregor shortly before shutting off, and then it did it again, and again, and again, and okay, you get the point. In the end, this one Raptor ended up lighting around 40 times, 34 of which were back-to-back with just a few seconds between them. Wow. Dude. Another example of lots of things being very different on a Starship. Relighting a BE-4 40 times would currently make little sense. Reuse is planned for some time in the future, but it's not even sure if that will ever happen on a Falcon rocket, so ULA doesn't need to bother with that. SpaceX's story here is different though. They wanted to see how well the components of a Raptor do after multiple relights, as unlike other engines, Raptors not only need to relight once or twice during a lifetime, but hundreds, or in the future thousands, or even tens of thousands of times before retirement. Like a jet engine. They were testing how much wear and tear a Raptor engine receives from multiple relights, so they know where to reinforce to ensure the Raptor isn't just refurbishable, but reusable. Even though SpaceX is aiming for full reusability with Starship, just having partial refurbishability with the Falcon 9 has already allowed SpaceX to dominate the industry. They are launching more times than any other government agency or private company in the world, and accounting for the vast majority of the world's mass to orbit for years now. In fact, SpaceX has been so dominant in the space industry that the Falcon 9, despite only being refurbishable, has now achieved 100 launches this year alone. And there is still some time left to drive that record up even further for 2024. That number is ridiculous. To put it in perspective, this launch was only the 195th orbital launch of 2024, meaning that all other rockets, including even other SpaceX rockets such as Falcon Heavy and Starship, have only launched 95 times this year. Surprisingly, despite most of the Falcon 9's launch cadence being Starlink satellites, this record-breaking mission was most likely a Star Shield mission for the National Reconnaissance Office. Secretly. These are predicted to be very similar to Starlink satellites, however they have been modified to perform duties for the military. With Falcon 9 dominating the launch market, many other companies are beginning to find it difficult to compete with SpaceX's rapidly shrinking prices and increasing capabilities. However, one company hopes to match and even surpass SpaceX's capabilities. That company would be Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, of course, which has been developing its own partially reusable rocket in hopes of joining the likes of the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and for the time being, Starship. New Glenn has been in development for quite a few years now, with early development likely dating back to around 2013. That was 11 years ago. The vehicle was announced in 2016 for a launch date in 2020. That was 4 years ago. That launch date was not met. However, rocketry is rocketry, and meeting an initial launch date is about as rare as finding a unicorn. Make that a white one with a rainbow-colored horn. Now things are starting to move, with a launch date scheduled for next month. That's not too far away. However, to launch a rocket you need engines, and the last time we saw the first stage of New Glenn, those had yet to be installed. This changed a few days ago when Blue Origin shared this picture. Yep, it's got its engines now. There are 7 of them, to be precise, and each one produces over 500,000 pounds of thrust, around the same as a SpaceX Raptor. That means this vehicle is equipped with nearly 4 million pounds of thrust, which is just a million under SpaceX's 27-engine Falcon Heavy. It is considerably more powerful than a Falcon 9, all that's left now is a static fire. Yeah. From here, Blue Origin will roll the booster out to the launch site before static firing it, and then it will be ready for launch. The question now is, which do you think will launch first, New Glenn or Flight 6? Place your bets below. Which implies another important question. Do you think Blue Origin is too late for the party? Will it be able to compete with a fully operational Starship? With New Glenn expected to come online shortly, Blue Origin seems to be in a decent spot in this new highly competitive space market. They may be in second place even though they've not launched yet. Not every company can be so lucky. Astra is a company that has not had the best run in this new space race. Unlike many other space startups, Astra successfully reached orbit back in 2021. However, its rocket failed multiple times after that successful orbit, leading to massive losses, with the company reportedly losing around $750 million. We know this because Astra was a public company for about 2.5 years before its losses became so high and its valuation dropped so low that it was forced to buy back all of its shares and go private to avoid bankruptcy. Whew. Whenever the company went private, its valuation was a measly $13 million, down from nearly $2.6 billion. Have fun calculating the percentage. Despite this, Astra's luck may yet be about to turn around. They just received a contract from the Department of Defense worth up to $44 million. This contract is to continue the development of Astra's hardware to facilitate, and I quote, the production capabilities of Astra's unique tactically responsive launch system. In other words, the Department of Defense wants to have more rockets capable of launching at a moment's notice. There are a few other companies that have this capability, however the Department of Defense highly values redundancy, which allows it to keep options open. Astra will use this money to continue the development of their Rocket 4, which should be an upgraded version of their previous Rocket 3, which had major reliability issues. Hopefully this contract will give Astra a much needed boost to turn its luck around. Today's last story is a quick follow-up to a story we covered in the previous episode, Crew 8's return from the ISS. For those who are unaware, Crew 8, as the name implies, is the 8th mission of the commercial Crew program launched by SpaceX to support NASA's expeditions to the International Space Station. Wow! This mission broke many records, including the longest amount of time a crewed vehicle has spent in space ever. After an extended stay at the International Space Station due to weather concerns in the landing zone, it finally splashed down off the coast of Florida for recovery. As usual, the Marine teams quickly scooped the Dragon out of the water before welcoming the crew back on Earth. However, there was a problem. Upon landing, one of the crew members appears to have had a slight medical emergency. An unnamed member of the crew was shortly after rushed to a hospital for checkups and treatment. Fortunately, it doesn't appear anything was drastic, as they have since been discharged. This is a good reminder that space is not easy, and even with flights becoming more regular, it is important to keep that in mind. The astronauts spent over 7 months in microgravity, where their bodies became used to the environment of space. Because no gravity is acting on the astronauts, the body naturally reduces unnecessary systems, decreasing bone mass and allowing the heart to grow weak. This is why astronauts spend many hours exercising to prevent this. During re-entry, an astronaut encounters multiple times Earth's gravity, which can put extra strain on the body in addition to returning to normal gravity. I'm glad they are all safely back on Earth, and hopefully they are doing much better now. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm. This is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our epic Flight 5 design are both up. Starting tomorrow, we have a free standard shipping in the US store until November 3rd on everything. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Grades that it'll boom, it'll de boom. Peered. I'm sorry. Looky. Hover, ba. I love that word. Because yes. I'm like a Pez dispenser.